The bank statement was cold in my hands. $240,000 transferred out of my trust account in 8 months. I sat in Dr. Morrison's office, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across her desk, and tried to understand how the life I had built could unravel so quickly. My son David called that morning. His voice had that urgent quality I had learned to recognize over the past year. "Mom, I need you to sign some documents for the trust. Dad's estate requires some adjustments, and I've already paid most of the legal fees. If you don't sign soon, the taxes are going to be astronomical." It was reasonable. It sounded responsible. I was arranging the documents when my daughter Jessica called from San Francisco. "Mom, don't sign anything David sends you without having a lawyer review it first." She sounded scared, a tone I hadn't heard from her since her divorce 5 years ago. "What do you mean?" I asked, though something in my chest tightened. "Just trust me, Mom, please." I called my bank that afternoon. The account manager, a young woman named Sarah, pulled up my statements with practiced fingers. "Mrs. Hayes, these transfers started 9 months ago. Does David have power of attorney over this account?" I didn't remember giving him power of attorney, but I had been grieving, lost in the fog of losing my husband of 43 years. Details had become difficult. "Let me check the paperwork," I said. Going through my files took 3 hours. I found the documents David had requested I sign 6 months after Robert died. He had written them up himself, professional looking, with tabs indicating exactly where to sign. I hadn't read them carefully. I had been in a cloud of pain, and David had taken care of everything after his father's funeral. It seemed manageable to give him access to handle the estate taxes. But the transfers had been happening for 8 months. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $8,000 there. Money for his business, he said, a business I had never heard him discuss. Money for investments, money for his daughter's college fund. Each request seemed reasonable when asked individually, but the pattern over 8 months was devastating. $240,000 gone. I called David that evening. The phone rang once before he answered, as if he had been waiting. "Mom, I'm glad you're calling. I know the transfers might seem like a lot, but I've been very careful with your money. I've invested it wisely. It's not gone. It's working for you." "Where is it, David?" I asked, and I heard my voice shake. "It's in some commercial real estate opportunities I found. Smart investments, Mom. You'll see returns within 2 years. I trusted you with that money. I didn't authorize you to invest it. I need it back." The silence on the line stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Mom, I've already committed to these investments. I can't just pull it out. And honestly, I don't think you understand how complex these things are. Why don't you let me handle this? I'll get you statements and explain everything. But for now, you don't need to worry. I need the money back, David. We'll talk about this later. I'm busy right now." He hung up. I sat in my study, surrounded by books I had spent a lifetime collecting, in the house Robert and I had bought 40 years ago, and felt the ground shake beneath me. Jessica called back the next morning. "You found something, didn't you?" she said immediately. "I found that your brother has transferred $250,000 from my trust account." "Oh, Mom, I was afraid of this." She took a deep breath. "David's been asking me for money for a year. I refused, so he probably started working on you. What does he say the money is for?" "Investments, but he won't tell me where the money actually is." "Have you called a lawyer?" I was about to. "Do that today, Mom. Don't let David convince you it's fine. I know my brother. Once he decides you're a source of money, he won't stop." My lawyer was a woman named Patricia Chin, who had handled my affairs for 12 years. She reviewed everything in silence, her expression growing darker as she read. "This is elder fraud, Margaret. Whether he intends it that way or not, taking this much money without explicit consent and not providing accounting is fraud. We need to freeze that account immediately and file a police report." "A police report against my own son?" "Yes." That conversation took place on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, David had contacted me 17 times. Voicemails full of explanations, promises, requests for more time. I didn't call him back. Patricia had advised against it. Instead, I did something I had never done before. I hired a forensic accountant named Tom Martinez to trace exactly where my money had gone. The report he delivered 3 weeks later was methodical and damning. Of the $240,000 transferred from your account, approximately $180,000 has been spent on personal expenses, credit card payments, luxury goods, restaurant charges, and travel. The remaining $60,000 has been transferred to an offshore account registered in your son's name through a company he created specifically to receive your money. There are no real estate investments, Mrs. Hayes. There are no legitimate business ventures. The money has been spent, and the remainder is hidden. I read that report 3 times, searching for any detail that might change the meaning of those words. There was none. My son had stolen from me. Not accidentally, not as a mistake, but deliberately and methodically. The police investigation took 6 weeks. Detective James Rivera and I met in my kitchen on a Thursday afternoon. "The evidence is significant," Detective Rivera said, spreading papers across my table. "We have transferred records, email communications, credit card statements. Your son is being charged with felony fraud, elder theft, and money laundering." "What happens now?" "We'll issue an arrest warrant. He'll be taken into custody for processing." I called David myself before the police arrived. I needed to hear his voice when he understood what he had done. "I know what you've done," I said calmly. "The police are coming to arrest you." The silence before his response was long enough for me to hear him breathing. "That's not fair, Mom. I was only trying to help. You stole my money." "It's not stealing if it's family money. You have plenty. I was struggling. I need you to tell the police you're dropping the charges." "I'm not dropping the charges." "Then you're not my mother." Those were the last words David spoke to me before the doorbell rang and the police officer stepped into my home. The arrest happened in front of 17 of my neighbors. I stood in my yard while they placed my son in the back of a police car, and I felt something shatter inside me that I would spend the next year trying to repair. My relationship with Jessica, my daughter, became my lifeline during that period. She came home from San Francisco for the trial, taking a leave of absence from her job as a nonprofit director. We spent hours going through family photo albums, trying to understand where exactly our family had begun to fracture. "David was always different," Jessica reflected one evening, holding a photo of us from when he was 14. "Even then, he was calculating. I remember him charging us money to help with household chores. He said everyone needed to learn the value of money early." "He was resourceful," I said, trying to find some positive interpretation, but I knew what she meant. David had always looked at the world in terms of transactions, relationships as exchanges rather than connections. The trial took 4 months. David's defense was that he had believed I wanted him to invest my money, that he had misunderstood the scope of the power of attorney documents, that the money in the offshore account was a safekeeping measure for my protection. None of it was believable to anyone who examined the evidence. But what stunned me most was the moment when David's lawyer brought me to the stand to testify. "Mrs. Hayes, did your son ever directly ask your permission to transfer these funds?" "Not in those exact terms," I admitted. "He mentioned needing help, and I recall approving certain individual requests, but not $240,000 in total transfers." "So some of the money transfers you did authorize?" "Some amounts, yes, but not the complete sum. And I did not authorize him to move the money to offshore accounts." "But you gave him power of attorney, didn't you?" The implication hung there. Hadn't I been careless? Hadn't I signed documents without reading them carefully? "I did," I confirmed, "but power of attorney does not give someone the right to steal." The judge ruled that it was theft, found David guilty on all counts, and sentenced him to 3 years in prison. When they removed him from the courtroom, he looked at me with such pure hatred that I had to look away. The next 18 months were a process of reconstruction. I had to rebuild my trust account, which meant liquidating certain investments. I had to reorganize my will, which had named David as executor. I had to think through whether I was even willing to have contact with my son after his release from prison. The more difficult reconstruction was internal. I had to rebuild my understanding of my own judgment. I had given power of attorney to someone I now understood I had never truly known. How many other decisions had I made from a place of blind hope rather than clear sight? Jessica and I traveled together that year. We went to Barcelona for 2 weeks, to Athens for 3, to the Amalfi Coast for another 2. We talked about mother's love and about the limits of that love. We talked about whether forgiveness was possible without trust. I realized something important during those travels. My love for David had not been conditional on his worthiness of it. I had loved him because he was my son, because I had raised him, because he was part of my story. But love is not the same as enabling. Love is not the same as allowing yourself to be destroyed by another person. When David was released from prison after 3 years, I did not go to meet him. I had moved into a smaller house, updated my will entirely, and changed my security protocols. I had 3 excellent locks on my doors and a security system that monitored my movements. Jessica called the first week David was released, checking on me. "Has he contacted you?" "No," I said, "and I don't expect him to. He made it clear I was no longer his mother when the police arrested him." "Do you want to hear from him?" I considered the question carefully. I had spent 3 years processing that betrayal, understanding it, compartmentalizing it. The woman I had become in that 3-year period was not willing to expose herself to that kind of pain again. "No," I said finally, "I don't want contact, not now, perhaps not ever." I was 68 when David stole my money. I was 71 when he was released from prison. Those 3 years had aged me in ways that had nothing to do with actual time passing. There were gray streaks in my hair now that had nothing to do with natural aging. There were lines around my eyes from crying, from stress, from the process of understanding betrayal. But there was something else too, something harder, a core of self-protection that I had never possessed before. I had learned that protecting myself was not selfish, setting boundaries was not cruel, choosing not to be destroyed by someone else's choices was not abandonment. A year after David's release, I received a letter. It was addressed in his handwriting, and I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. The letter was written on prison stationery, dated from while he was still incarcerated. "Mom, I want to apologize. Not because I got caught, not because I'm going to prison, but because I finally understand what I did. I spent 2 years in therapy here, and I've realized that I've been angry at you my entire life. Angry that you were successful when my father struggled with confidence. Angry that you loved your career as much as you loved parenting. Angry that you seemed to find meaning in things beyond family. I told myself that taking the money would make us equal, that it would balance the score. It sounds insane when I write it, but it made sense in my head for years." The letter went on for multiple pages. David detailed the therapy he was undergoing, the realizations he was making, the fundamental brokenness in his thinking that had led to the theft. He ended with a paragraph that made me cry. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Mom. I don't expect you to trust me again. I just wanted you to know that none of what I did was your fault. You were a good mother. You were a strong mother. The problem was always with me. I hope someday you can find peace knowing that the person who hurt you is being held accountable by the person it matters most to, myself." I read that letter 5 times. I sat with it for a week before deciding what to do. I did not visit David when he was released, but I did write him a letter. In it, I told him that I believed he was genuinely changing. I told him that I forgave him for what he had done, but that forgiveness did not equal reconciliation. I told him that I loved him, but that love could not be rebuilt into trust without time, evidence, and his commitment to continued growth. Most importantly, I told him that I was no longer responsible for his healing. That was his burden to carry, not mine. 2 years after David's release from prison, I received an unexpected call from him. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear his voice. "Hi, Mom," he said when I picked up. "I'm calling because I wanted to tell you something important before you heard it from someone else. I'm married to a woman named Sophie. We met in the support group I've been attending. She's been incredibly patient with me and my complicated history with my family. I wanted you to know. And I wanted you to know that I've set up my financial affairs so I have no access to anyone else's money. Sophie knows my history, and we have an agreement that I don't manage finances. I see a therapist twice a week. I work at a nonprofit organization that helps people recovering from addiction and financial crimes. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a relationship. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. I'm glad to hear that, David, I said, and I meant it. Perhaps someday we can have a conversation beyond this, but I need you to understand that I can't go back to how we were before. I can't pretend the betrayal didn't happen. I understand, Mom. That's all I'm asking for. That you know I understand. We ended the call without making any plans for future contact, but something in me shifted. Not forgiveness in the sense of erasure, not trust in any immediate sense, but an acknowledgement that David was making a genuine effort to change, that perhaps reconciliation was possible someday, on my terms and timeline, not his. Jessica and I still travel every year. I turned 75 last month and we went to Peru to celebrate. I take watercolor classes on Tuesday afternoons. I volunteer at the museum where I used to teach. I have lunch with friends every Thursday. I live my life fully, unapologetically, on my own terms. My security system still monitors my house. I still review all financial statements personally. I still have locks on my bedroom door and a separate savings account that no one knows about. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I've learned that protecting yourself is an act of wisdom, not fear. David calls me once a month. We talk about neutral things, the weather, his work at the nonprofit, Sophie's pregnancy, they're expecting their first child. We don't talk about the theft, about his incarceration, about the years we lost. Maybe someday we will, but for now, this is enough. What I learned through this experience is that family is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for betrayal, that blood relations do not override fundamental human decency, that loving someone does not mean allowing yourself to be used. I learned that reclaiming your life requires boundaries that others will resent, that healing requires time and solitude and honest reflection, that the person you become after betrayal can be stronger, not weaker, if you let yourself build carefully. When I look in the mirror now, I see a woman who knows her value, who won't apologize for her intelligence, her success, her independence, who loves her children but refuses to be destroyed by them. That woman is Margaret Eleanor Hayes. That woman is enough.